The following is an AZPM original production.
For AZPM, I'm Mark McLemore, and this is Arizona Spotlight. Coming up, meet Bunny Beatdown, a member of the Tucson Roller Derby squad, Javelina Havoc. Her story is the center of a new short film about this vibrant scene. Learn about the Rogue Theater's new production, Cloud 9. It's a time, mind, and gender-bending satire of English history. And the story of Chris Tanz, a Tucson resident who survived the Holocaust as a child thanks to her parents' willpower and love. Those stories are next on Arizona Spotlight. Across the United States, transgender athletes have become the focus of scrutiny and in some places are being legislated against. But close to home, there's a place where gender identity is not disqualifying to those who want to compete in an aggressive physical sport. Tucson Roller Derby is a part of a larger movement in roller derby that challenges gender norms and supports LGBTQIA+ athletes. There is now a short film that highlights the story of a player for the Javelina Havoc. Her name is Bunny Beatdown, a transgender athlete. We'll hear from her in this interview that begins with the film's director explaining why this was a story she wanted to tell.
So I'm Alessandra de Subeldia. I recently graduated with a master's in investigative journalism from ASU's Cronkite School of Journalism. I did that kind of as a career switch. Before that, my undergrad was creative writing, actually at the U of A, and English. But I wanted to use my storytelling skills and my interest in that for something that felt more purposeful. I took a class with, her name is Adriana Zebrauskas. She's a Brazilian photojournalist. And we had a project throughout that whole semester that we had to essentially create a photo and video story that we could follow throughout the whole semester. When I thought of what interested me and what's something that would be visually interesting, I thought of my time at Tucson Roller Derby. I played with them for a bit. It was maybe about like a year before I got injured and didn't go back. And I thought that the way that they approached their inclusiveness and having, trans players and gender fluid people all on the same team, I found it very just impressive, and I wanted to learn more about it, especially how seamlessly the team seemed to do it.
Bunny, where would you like to begin sharing your story?
Yeah, I had been going to school. I was at UCLA in California. I was a transfer student, and this was right before COVID happened. So I'd started to kind of being in this like big city and meeting queer people, and I wasn't out or queer or anything at that point. I didn't know, but I was meeting other people, and I was like, maybe I don't know myself very well, I think. Then COVID happened.
Yeah.
And I was with someone I'd known who was already queer, and they were like, I think there's something fruity about you. I don't know what, but...
You and a friend and COVID, which was a time when a lot of people were questioning their own identities or thinking, if I don't ever take control of the situation, I'm never going to be happy. So it's now or never.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of friends who came out, trans girls who came out in COVID because we were locked down together and 8 months without really leaving the house kind of thing, and like trying to find jobs and just nothing to think about but this, and with nothing else going on, I couldn't ignore it anymore. And that was like maybe April or May is when I sort of came out to myself, and then I came out to my partner. And it wasn't until sometime in 2021 that I got on hormones. And it wasn't till maybe even a year later that I was even out at work.
But when was it that you came out as a titan of roller derby?
Well, okay, after I had gotten my big girl job, I was in LA, I was like out everywhere, and I was like, okay, I have this sort of new body. I don't know how to find friends. What's the craziest thing I could think of doing? And I was like, I just watched Whip It. A lot of us had, and I was like, wait, roller derby is really cool. It's like all these women getting together doing this contact sport, and like it seems really queer friendly. I bet that would be fun. So in LA, I joined, they're called Fresh Meat, the beginning classes. They taught me how to skate. I was like, this is so much fun. I didn't get on a team at any point there. And then we moved here and I joined Tucson Roller Derby, which is a totally different vibe. So much more DIY. It's Tucson, we like play outside in the summer on concrete. We don't have like a big facility. And I wasn't the only trans person there.
Alessandra, tell us about your experience as a journalist and storyteller, getting to know the same people that Bunny is playing with and on the team with, and what your reaction or your analysis of their social network is like.
Yeah, I would say since I joined, even just as a player, it was very evident that people didn't have to exist within any sort of box. So even as a cis woman going into this space, I quickly started questioning even things about my own personal grooming, like down to why am I shaving my armpits? Even tiny things like that, but everyone seemed to just express themselves and their body the way that they wanted to. So that had an impact on me, and seeing how everyone was able to, play this contact sport despite all the conversations going around in the world of, trans people can't be intermingling. Hearing all of those conversations, but then seeing very easily that this group of people was making it work in small and big ways. So then once I decided to tackle the story when I was in journalism school, I quickly saw the same thing that I had felt when I was just a player, which was everyone was very concerned with making sure that everyone felt comfortable and seen and heard. So even just doing the story was a big team discussion. They wanted to make sure that everyone felt safe about being kind of, put on the spot when you're in a news story.
Sure.
They had, I believe, a team meeting or league meeting.
Yeah. I guess I sort of gave a presentation to everyone, and we talked about, the potential dangers of having our name associated with trans and sports out in the news, because other leagues have lost spaces to play in or other sports things. And everyone unequivocally was like, no, I think that you should do this.
For our listeners who want to see this film, where can people find it?
If you want to watch the video that is about Bunny Beatdown and a couple other teammates who are gender fluid and intersex on Tucson Roller Derby, you can go to Arizona Luminaria. They published an article, so there's a written component. There's photos, mostly of Bunny Beatdown as well. And then if you are a Spanish speaker or know someone who's only a Spanish speaker, there is also a Spanish version of that article with Spanish subtitles for the video.
And we'll have links to that material on the Spotlight page at azpm.org. And Bunny, for people who actually want to go to a game and see Javelina Havoc in action, what can you tell them?
We have a bout on November 1st. It's at the Pima County Fairgrounds. It's going to be a doubleheader with Javelina Havoc playing AZRD's Bad News Beaters, and then our B team is debuting, and they're playing Skate Riot Project. You can go online to our website at TucsonRollerDerby.org, or just look up on Instagram, Tucson Roller Derby, and come out and watch us play. Say hi, bring bunny ears for me, and I'll say hi to you.
I spoke with director Alessandra de Zubeldia and Tucson Roller Derby jammer Bunny Beatdown. You can find photos and a link to watch the video on the Spotlight page at azpm.org. Tucson's Rogue Theater is now in its 21st performing arts season. I think it's safe to say that each year sees the Rogue's artistic personnel choosing even more ambitious and thought-provoking plays. While always steeped in the classics, their next production, Cloud 9, was written in 1979 by Carol Churchill, who has been described as one of Britain's greatest poets and innovators for the contemporary stage. It's a satire about English culture and politics that shifts between two time frames about a century apart and includes characters that are played by two different actors as well, indifferent to age or gender. Here to shed some light on the play are three members of the Rogue Theater's creative ensemble.
Hi, my name is Christopher Johnson, and I'm the director of Cloud 9 at the Rogue.
My name is Hunter Nat, and I play Betty in the first act, and in the second act I play a guy named Jerry.
My name is Cynthia Jeffrey, and I play 3 roles. Ellen, the governess, Mrs. Saunders, and Betty in Act 2.
So you're both playing the same character in different acts. When I looked at the synopsis of this play, I had difficulty parsing what was going on just from the Wikipedia page. So, Christopher, let's explain why this was chosen. I know the Rogue Theater is very intentional about the plays that are chosen. So tell me how Cloud 9 made the cut.
Cloud 9 has an interesting place in the canon. It's a classic piece of literature, and we're always pursuing literature at the Rogue. But what Cloud 9 has that a lot of other classic plays don't have is this incredible polyvocality. It gives voice to identities that you don't really see represented or represented well in a lot of classic plays. And it's widely regarded as a feminist and queer classic of the time.
Hunter, what was your reaction when you read the script?
As a gay man, it's very interesting to play a character that is a gay man. As an actor, it's really difficult to play yourself to some regard. So it's like I'm kind of peeling back the layers and showing like the inner machinations of like some of my life. But Jerry is in the second act very crass, but it's all about cruising culture and like really the 70s, very hypersexualized, which is really cool and really fun and kind of scary to talk about with all of our patrons who, you know, we deal with like Shakespeare, but yet it's really, really fun to just be more modern.
As a gay classical actor, you very often, I think, and you know, I can relate, you compromise yourself somewhat to act regularly because we're usually playing straight on stage. We don't get that many opportunities to play or represent voices that are this close to our own.
Absolutely. And the first act, as I said, I'm Betty. So I get to be this woman who is really put down by the man of the house, and she has to be kind of subservient and just trying to lift him up all the time and kind of silence herself. The thing I was most excited for is to show the contrast with representing a woman and then this guy who's very kind of like mask presenting, and just to go from those two types is really exciting.
Cynthia, I would like to hear your reaction when you first read the script, but also can you explain how Act 1 and Act 2 are set in very different time periods?
I'll do my best. First off, I have to admit to being a little embarrassed to be completely confused by this play when I first read it. The first act seemed very Monty Pythonish to me, a farce, funny, but also with an undercurrent of some very serious subjects. And then Act 2 is like doing a completely different play. These subjects are brought to light, they're talked about openly, and the difference between the two characters, myself as Betty and Hunter as Betty, he plays Betty in the Victorian era with the rules and regulations that went with being a woman of that period, and I represent the Betty who has suddenly found herself thrust into the 1970s, where she's encouraged to be independent, to just recognize her own self as a person, worthy of all the love and attention and challenges that go along with anyone living in that period.
Christopher, as director, what would you say was one of the greatest challenges that Cloud 9 presented?
I think the greatest challenge we face is really making the story both entertaining and comprehensible. There are so many big, contradictory ideas at play, and the artistic license and experimentation that the playwright employs in this script are really wild and over the top. It can be really overwhelming, but it has so much heart and it's so fiercely intelligent about these issues that we really felt it was worth presenting to our very curious audience.
Hunter, is it fun being in the 1970s?
Absolutely. We were having a strike party for our previous show, and I got all dressed up for it, and Cindy, who does the costuming for the Rogue, looked at me and said, "Hey, that's your costume for the next show in the 70s. So it's already my style, it's already my aesthetic. So it was very exciting to be able to wear some of my own clothes.
Cynthia, which of the two time periods do you prefer acting in? And how was your costume? I imagine the Act One costume is a little more intense than what you're wearing in the 1970s.
I have about 10 different changes in Act One. I have to go between characters, Mrs. Saunders and Ellen the governess. If you hear footsteps backstage running from one side to the other, that's me trying to change costumes. In terms of what time period, well, in the 70s, I was in my teens, and that was fun, everything that was involved with that. That was mostly high school and dances and fun stuff, not necessarily being involved with the politics of the time, although I was aware of the politics. It's nice to revisit that because now here I am, 65 years of age. I'm looking back and seeing how truly important and critical all of those experiences were for that time period in our history. And it's an awakening, you might say. Cloud Nine for me is an awakening.
Christopher, tell our audience where and when Cloud Nine will be.
Cloud Nine by Carol Churchill is playing at the Rogue Theater at the Historic Y, October 31st through November 23rd. Performances of Cloud Nine play Fridays through Sundays, 7:30 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays, and 2 p.m. matinees on Saturdays and Sundays.
You just heard director Christopher Johnson and actors Cynthia Jeffrey and Hunter Nat of the Rogue Theater. Between 1941 and 1945, Germany's Nazi regime murdered 2/3 of Europe's Jewish population. Of the 6 million Jews who were victims of the genocide known as the Holocaust, an estimated 1.5 million were children. Against all odds, some of these children managed to survive. Children of the Holocaust is ACPM's Living History Project. Project producer Laura Markowitz interviewed 20 child survivors of the Holocaust who came to live later in southern Arizona. The following is an excerpt from the story of Chris Tanz, who died earlier this month. Tanz was beloved for her kind personality and for her public artworks, which are installed throughout southern Arizona. They celebrate her vision of cooperation and peace across differences. Here now is the story produced by Laura Markowitz in the summer of 2023.
In 1943, a couple named Regina and Henrik Tanz learned that Regina was pregnant. But it was the middle of World War II, and they were Polish Jews hiding from the Nazis by passing as Gentiles. To have a Jewish baby in the middle of the Holocaust was taking a huge risk, but they decided to do it anyway. They had a daughter. Her name is Chris Tanz, and this is her story.
Wojenko, wojenko, cóż ty za pani, że za tobą idą chłopcy malowani. It's a song that's addressed to war. In Polish, war is wojna. And here it's being addressed to war in the diminutive and feminine. Like, nice little war, what kind of woman are you that all these young men go chasing after you? Well, my parents were both born in Krakow. So my father became a lawyer in Poland. And then on September 1st, 1939, the Nazis invaded Poland. And my father went to join his army regiment. When he got there, he discovered that the regiment had been disbanded. And he concluded that the only thing to do was to go back home to Krakow and ask my mother to marry him. So he went back home, and they got married on September 4th, 1939, the fourth day of the war.
3 days later, the Nazis marched into their city.
There was an edict that they had to move into a ghetto. And at first, the ghetto provided relative security only because of the huge danger outside the ghetto. If they were caught outside the ghetto without, some kind of work papers, they could just be shot in the street. My mother didn't talk to me as I was growing up very much about the horrible things that happened. I think she was sparing me. But she did have one memory from when they were in the ghetto of seeing an older woman shot and her brain and eyes splattering against a wall. It seems like that experience made them decide they had to leave the ghetto. My father forged fake ID documents, but the grandparents, because they were older, felt it was too risky to try to go somewhere else, and they stayed.
In 1942, the SS came into the ghetto, rounded up the remaining Jews, and crammed them into cattle cars bound for concentration camps. Chris's grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, they were all taken away. None of those relatives survived, except for one uncle who was 18 years old at the time. But Henrik and Regina had already snuck out of the ghetto and gone into hiding under their new identities.
One thing that helped was that my father was blonde and had blue eyes. They spoke both Polish and Yiddish, but they spoke Polish without a Yiddish accent, which made it conceivable for them to pass. And they also exercised enormous caution. They never sat together on a train during the war, so that if one of them ran into a problem, the other one could in some way intervene. There was danger from many directions in Poland, and I'm not just from the Nazis, but from people in the public. And there was an occasion when on the street once, they were walking but not together, and my father saw my mother being surrounded by a group of men. He went over and he offered a bribe to get her out of there. And they took the money. My mother and my father got away. One time in Warsaw, when my father was walking on the street, a man said to him, "I know you, you're a Jew." And my father punched the guy. People gathered around, and my father said, "He said I was a Jew." And then he walked away.
In July 1944, 6 police officers came to their door. Regina was already 7 months pregnant. Henrik had to bluff his way out of being arrested. After that incident, they knew they had to disappear immediately.
And they told their landlady that they were just going off on vacation. And they crossed the Vistula River, in Polish, Wisła, to a little town on the other side called Otwock.
A few days later, on August 1st, 1944, the Polish resistance attempted to liberate Warsaw from Nazi occupation. The Soviet army was advancing on the city from the east, but before they crossed the river, the troops were ordered to stop and let the Poles and Germans fight it out first.
And my parents, they could see smoke rising, and they could see the destruction. And so, amazingly, they had been saved because of this invasion by 6 Polish police officers that had scared them out of Warsaw.
A few weeks later, Regina went into labor.
So I was born in this little military hospital in the countryside. And the doctor who delivered me asked them if they knew what day it was. And they said no. He told them it was Yom Kippur. Clearly, that doctor realized they were Jewish, and it turned out that he was a Russian Jew.
The war ended in Poland in January of 1945. Her family moved to France in 1948, and when Chris was 7, they emigrated to the United States. She says starting over and learning English was a struggle, especially for her parents.
I think in some ways they were grieving, but I also came to marvel that they managed, despite the incredible hardships they had gone through, they managed, for one thing, to give my brother and me a happy childhood. So they were not pouring their grief into us. I have a specific memory of my father when I was very young, and I don't know if I was still in Poland or in France, directing my attention to look at the shadow of a tree on a wall. And it was a very beautiful, sharp shadow. The tree didn't have leaves, so it was just its articulated branches. And my father did that a lot with me, directing my attention to the beauty of nature. And that has stayed with me so much. And I think it was a way for him to get past what they had suffered.
Chris ended up earning a PhD in psycholinguistics, and she taught psychology at the University of Arizona. When she left academia in the 1990s, she stayed in Tucson and became a public artist.
I felt that I was growing deep roots in the place where I lived.
One of her pieces is called Joining Hands. It's on the Julian Wash segment of The Loop.
And it's an arch over the bike path. And the top of the arch is cut in steel, and it's figures holding hands. And the figures come from a ceramic pot that was made by people of the Holocaust tribe, 1,000 years old, and it has survived. And it's a celebration of community. My family's life was so profoundly affected by conflict between different elements of the community in some sense, Jews and non-Jews, this devastating conflict that destroyed so many lives. It gives me great joy to have been able to make a celebration of the opposite of conflict, of cooperation and mutual aid as an image of our community.
Chris Tanz is well aware that humans are capable of committing genocide, but she chooses to focus on our ability to create beauty for one another. She hopes her art transmits the sense of wonder she feels at the incredible gift we've been given to live in this place with one another. For Arizona Spotlight, this is Laura Markowitz.
Chris Tanz passed away peacefully in her Tucson home on Saturday, October 11th. The full video interview with Tanz and many more stories of survival can be found on the Children of the Holocaust page at azpm.org. Thank you for listening to Arizona Spotlight. This show is a production of AZPM. The production engineer is Jim Blackwood. I'm producer and host Mark McLemore.
AZPM podcasts are made possible in part by donations from listeners like you. Learn more at support.azpm.org. Thank you.